Imagine someone hands you an audio tape to help you fall asleep.
Right, like a sleep aid kind of thing.
Exactly, a digital lullaby. So you are lying there in your warm, safe bed, right? You're sinking into the mattress.
Yeah.
And you put on your headphones expecting to hear, I don't know, the gentle patter of rain on a roof or maybe like soft ocean waves.
Something relaxing, yeah.
But instead, this soothing, hypnotic voice in your ears starts calmly describing a literal alien war zone.
Which is just such a jarring contrast.
It really is. It describes a pitch black void where creatures wear like literal black holes as camouflage.
To avoid these biological targeting lasers.
Right. And then it describes an environment where the earth is torn open, violently belching toxic fire to keep these bizarre ecosystems alive.
In the crushing dark, no less.
Exactly. And it even tells you about organisms that have just, decided to opt out of the concept of biological death entirely.
It is a phenomenal contradiction. I mean, the document we're looking at for today's deep dive is literally titled Shadows of the Hadal Zone, 100 Deep Sea Alien Facts for Deep Sleep.
Which is just wild to me.
It is. The entire premise is that you use this information to, drift off into peaceful unconsciousness.
Right.
But the actual biological and geological reality it describes is, it's a nightmare of survival.
It totally is.
It challenges everything we intuitively understand about how life works, how geology works, and even how time works.
And that contradiction is exactly where we are starting today. Because, we're looking downward.
Right.
When humanity talks about exploring an alien world, our collective instinct is always to look up, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We build telescopes, we aim them at the night sky.
Right. We imagine the cold vacuum of space, and we theorize about entirely different planets with unbreathable atmospheres.
We have this deeply ingrained assumption that alien inherently means extraterrestrial.
Exactly. We assume that to find an environment that operates by fundamentally different physical rules, you have to cross millions of miles of empty space.
You have to escape Earth's gravity well.
Mm-hmm.
But what the source material highlights so vividly is that this alien realm is already here.
It's just beneath us.
Yeah. And when we talk about the ocean, we aren't talking about like scuba diving depths.
Right.
Or even the depths where military submarines operate. We are talking about the Hadal Zone.
The Hadal Zone. Just the name itself feels heavy.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
It comes from Hades, right? The ancient Greek underworld.
It is a very apt namesake because the Hadal Zone represents the absolute deepest parts of the global ocean.
We're talking about the deep ocean trenches here.
Exactly. Depths from roughly 6,000 meters down to 11,000 meters.
Wow.
To put that in perspective for you, if you took Mount Everest and dropped it into the Mariana Trench, the peak of the mountain would still be over a mile underwater.
That is just, I can't even wrap my head around that scale.
It's massive.
So we are dealing with an environment that is so far removed from the sunlit, warm, oxygen-rich surface world that the basic rules of existence just have to be rewritten from scratch.
Completely rewritten. The pressure down there is incomprehensible.
It's what, like 16,000 pounds per square inch at the bottom?
Yeah, right around there. Imagine the weight of an adult elephant standing on your thumb.
Oh my God.
Right. Every single square inch of your body would be experiencing that level of crushing force.
That's terrifying.
And the temperature hovers just a degree or two above freezing. But most importantly for our understanding of life, there's an absolute permanent absence of sunlight.
Right. Not a single photon from the sun makes it down there.
No. It is a world of eternal crushing night.
Which makes the first major revelation in our sleep tape so fascinating, and honestly a little counterintuitive.
So?
Well, because the document specifically highlights the visual adaptations of life in this absolute darkness.
Oh, right, yeah.
It describes a phenomenon regarding certain deep-sea fish, and the phrasing used is incredibly evocative.
It calls them ultra-blackfish,
yes.
Right?
Yes, claiming they trap 99% of light to become, quote, invisible shadows.
It sounds like, poetic imagery meant to lull a listener to sleep.
Right, exactly.
But it is actually a deeply precise physical description of what is happening on a microscopic level.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the term invisible shadow isn't a metaphor. It is the literal biological reality of these creatures.
Okay, I want to really dig into the physics of this because I think it's very easy to hear the phrase ultra black fish and just picture a fish that happens to be painted black.
Like a black car or something.
Right, or like a black t-shirt. But trapping 99.5% of light, which I think is the scientific measurement for some of these species, that's a completely different physical mechanism than just being a dark color.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is a fundamental difference in how matter interacts with electromagnetic radiation.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, to understand why an ultra-black adaptation is so profound, we have to strip away our everyday assumptions about how vision works.
Okay.
When you look at a black t-shirt in your room, you aren't actually seeing blackness.
Right.
You are seeing the ambient light from your lamp or your window hitting the fabric.
And then bouncing back.
Exactly. The dyes in the fabric absorb most of the visible spectrum of light, but they still reflect a small percentage of those photons back into your eyes.
And that tiny percentage of reflected light is the data my brain uses to construct the object.
Precisely.
Even though the shirt is dark, that reflected light shows me the folds in the fabric, the texture of the cotton.
The distinct edge where the shirt ends, the wall behind it begins.
Right. The object maintains its three-dimensional geometry in my visual field.
Yeah. Reflection is what gives an object its reality to an observer.
Wow.
But when the text states that these fish trap virtually all light, it implies an evolutionary eradication of reflection.
An eradication of reflection? That's intense.
It is. A photon, a particle of light, travels through the water, strikes the surface of this fish, and it does not bounce back.
It just stops.
It enters the physical boundary of the animal and is entirely lost. It is converted into a minuscule amount of heat.
Yeah.
Visually, the data simply ceases to exist.
So the observer's eye receives zero data.
Zero.
The physical boundaries, the depth, the curves of the fish, they all just vanish.
Yeah.
It ceases to be an object you can perceive. It becomes a literal hole in your field of vision.
That is the essence of the invisible shadow. You are looking at the absolute absence of visual information.
That is so wild.
And structurally, to achieve this near-perfect trap rate, pigment alone is insufficient.
Okay, because pigment still reflects some light.
Exactly. If you just cram a cell full of dark pigment, some light will still bounce off the surface of the cell membrane or the underlying tissues.
Right.
To trap 99.5% of light, you need architectural manipulation at the microscopic level.
So you need to build a trap, not just like paint a wall.
Yes. The skin of these ultra-black fish is packed with structures called melanosomes.
Melanosomes?
Yeah, these are tiny organelles within the cells that contain melanin, the same pigment that colors human skin and hair.
Okay, got it.
But it's the geometry and the distribution of these melanosomes that is the biological marvel here.
How so?
Well, in a normal fish, melanosomes are relatively small, spaced out, and unorganized.
So light hits the skin, some is absorbed, but a lot scatters between the gaps.
Exactly, and bounces back out. But the ultra-black fish have rearranged the architecture completely.
Radically.
Oh, radically. Their melanosomes are unusually large, shaped almost like microscopic tic-tacs.
Tic-tacs.
Yeah, and they are packed incredibly tightly into a continuous, dense layer right at the extreme outer surface of the skin.
So there are no gaps for the light to escape from.
None at all. Furthermore, the shape and the index of refraction of these structures are optimized so that when a photon enters this layer, it is directed sideways.
Oh wait, so it bends the light.
It scatters the light internally. A photon enters, hits a melanosome, and instead of reflecting outward, it bounces deeper into the adjacent melanosomes.
That's incredible.
It is effectively ping-ponging laterally through this dense pigment layer.
It's like a microscopic velvet labyrinth.
That's a great way to put it.
The light enters the canopy of this microscopic forest, but the arrangement of the structures forces the photon into like a maze of dead ends.
Yeah.
It bounces deeper and deeper, constantly losing energy until it is completely absorbed. It never finds its way back out to the water.
Microscopic velvet labyrinth captures the physics perfectly. It is highly structured optical engineering achieved through blind evolution.
Just to delete the organism from the visual spectrum.
Exactly.
Okay, but this raises a massive logical problem for me.
Oh, what's that?
Well, I'm trying to put myself in the perspective of a creature living in the Hadal zone.
Okay.
We have established that this is an environment of eternal darkness, right? The sun does not exist down here. It's an absolute void. So, if the room is already pitch black, why go through the immense calorie-burning biological effort to construct a velvet labyrinth on your skin?
Why evolve to hide in a room where no one can see anyway?
Exactly. And I'll push on this even further. If a fish absorbs all light, wouldn't it actually stand out more in certain situations?
Stand out. How do you mean?
Think about it. If I have a completely dark room, but there are tiny specks of light floating around, an object that absorbs absolutely everything would look like a dead pixel on a computer screen.
I see where you're going with this.
It would be a noticeable silhouette of nothingness against whatever faint background light exists. Why is being a black hole the optimal camouflage?
That is a brilliant counterintuitive point, and addressing it reveals the true, terrifying nature of the deep-sea ecosystem.
Okay, am I right?
You are absolutely right that in a softly, ambiently lit environment, a perfectly black silhouette would be highly visible.
Because you would see the shape of the darkness blocking the light.
Exactly. You'd see it blocking the ambient light behind it. But the deep ocean does not have ambient lighting.
It doesn't.
No, it does not glow softly in the background. The darkness is absolute, but it is punctured by highly directional, highly intense biological spotlights.
Wait, bioluminescence.
Bioluminescence. Life itself is the only source of photons down there.
Wow.
In an environment completely starved of solar energy, biology has taken up the mantle of illumination. The vast majority of creatures in the deep ocean produce their own light.
Through internal chemical reactions.
Yeah.
Right.
They mix a light-emitting molecule called luciferin with an enzyme called luciferase, and the resulting oxidation produces a burst of photons.
But they aren't using this light to softly illuminate their living rooms, are they?
Not at all. In a lightless void, a flashlight is a weapon.
A weapon.
It is a targeting laser. Predators down there have evolved massive, highly sensitive eyes, and they use their bioluminescence as searchlights.
Oh my God.
They sweep these biological high beams through the pitch-black water, hunting for the faint reflection of prey.
Which completely changes the visual physics of the environment. The light isn't coming from behind the prey, creating a silhouette.
Right.
The light is coming directly from the predator's face, pointing straight at the prey.
Exactly. It's like standing in a pitch-black field at midnight and someone is sweeping a police helicopter spotlight over the grass.
That is a terrifying image.
If you are a normal fish with normal scales, even if those scales are a dark brown or gray when that spotlight hits you, a tiny fraction of that intense beam reflects back.
To the predator's massive eyes.
Yeah, it's like a reflector on a bicycle catching a car's headlights. In that fraction of a second, your three-dimensional geometry is revealed.
And it's game over.
The predator calculates your distance, your trajectory, and you are consumed.
And this is where the velvet labyrinth saves your life.
This is the evolutionary arms race. If you are the ultra-black fish and that biological police spotlight sweeps directly over you, your microscopic architecture goes to work.
The photons strike the skin, enter the tightly packed melanosomes, and bounce sideways into the labyrinth.
Yes, and they dissipate as heat. 0 photons bounce back to the predator's eyes.
So to the predator, it just looks like the searchlight is illuminating empty water.
Exactly.
The beam hits you, but the light is swallowed. You are an invisible shadow inside the beam of light itself.
You have effectively consumed the predator's visual data.
That is just incredible.
The dead pixel problem you mentioned doesn't apply, because the predator isn't looking for a silhouette against a glowing background.
Right, it is actively firing photons at you and waiting for the echo.
Yes. And the ultra-black fish survives by ensuring there is never an echo. It just opts out of the physics of reflection entirely.
That completely shifts how you think about camouflage, you know?
It really does.
We usually think of camouflage as mimicking your surroundings, like a stick insect looking like a twig, or an octopus shifting its skin texture to match a coral reef.
Right, trying to blend in.
Yeah, they are trying to blend into the visual data of the background, but the ultra-black fish isn't mimicking anything.
No, it isn't.
It is actively destroying the visual data. It is a biological stealth bomber absorbing radar waves.
It is the ultimate defense mechanism, forged by an environment that is entirely unforgiving.
Seriously.
Every single spark of light bouncing off your scales equals instant death. The evolutionary pressure is so intense that it forces biology to engineer an optical trap that rivals advanced human metamaterials.
And what's wild is that this intense evolutionary arms race, I mean, the development of these microscopic photon traps, the biological searchlights, the massive sensitive eyes, all of this requires energy. It takes immense caloric output to manufacture complex proteins like luciferin.
Oh, massive amounts of energy.
And to build highly specialized melanosomes and to power the muscles of predators hunting in the dark.
Life is a very energy-intensive process.
But we are in an environment where the sun, the engine that drives almost all life on Earth, does not exist.
Right. The photosynthesis equation is completely broken down there.
Yeah, because on the surface, plants take solar photons, turn them into sugar, herbivores eat the plants, carnivores eat the herbivores.
It's a neat little chain.
But in the Hendel zone, there are no photons to start the chain. So how is this entire war zone fueled?
That's the million-dollar question. Historically, for a long time, marine biologists assumed the deep ocean was essentially a biological desert.
Really? A desert?
Yeah, they knew some life existed down there, but they assumed it was a slow, impoverished ecosystem entirely dependent on the surface. They called it marine snow.
Marine snow, that's a dead thing slowly sinking to the bottom, right?
Right. Dead plankton, whale carcasses, fish scales, organic detritus slowly drifting down miles through the water column.
Yuck. But okay.
The assumption was that deep-sea life simply scavenged the scraps falling from the sunlit world above.
Which makes sense on paper.
It does. And while marine snow is a factor, it is a very meager food supply. It cannot support dense, highly active, complex ecosystems like the ones we're talking about.
Which brings us to the second massive revelation in our source text. The sleep tape describes a geological phenomenon that completely shattered the marine snow theory.
Oh, yes.
It talks about black smoker events, and it uses an incredibly specific and honestly slightly terrifying phrase to describe what they're doing.
It says these vents are belching mineral-rich fluids, like underwater forges.
Underwater forges. I mean, when we analyze the language here, we see it perfectly encapsulates the shift from biology back to violent geology.
Absolutely. The discovery of these black smokers, hydrothermal vents in the late 1970s was arguably one of the most profound paradigm shifts in the history of biology.
I want to focus on that word forge, because a forge on land, like a blacksmith shop, is a place of extreme violence.
It really is.
It is defined by intense, searing heat, molten metal, sparks flying, and crushing pressure.
Yeah.
You take raw, inert, useless rock or iron, and you use immense thermal energy to violently hammer it into something complex and useful.
And that is a mathematically precise analogy for what the Earth's crust is doing at the bottom of the ocean.
Wait, really?
Yes. These hydrothermal vents are located along mid-ocean ridges, which are the massive underwater mountain ranges where the Earth tectonic plates are literally pulling apart.
So the crust of the Earth is just torn open.
It is a massive geological wound.
Hey.
And because the crust is fractured, freezing seawater, which at those depths is around 2 degrees Celsius, seeps down deep into the rock.
Okay.
It travels miles down into the crust until it approaches the underlying magma chambers.
And suddenly that freezing water meets the internal fires of the planet.
Exactly. The water is superheated. We are talking temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius, 750 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait, hold on. If the water is 400 degrees Celsius, why doesn't it boil? I mean, water boils at 100 degrees.
And that brings us right back to the pressure of the Hendel zone we talked about earlier.
The elephant on the thumb.
Yes. The 16,000 pounds of hydrostatic pressure per square inch physically prevents the water molecules from expanding into steam.
Oh, wow. So it's stuck as a liquid.
It becomes what we call a supercritical fluid. It's unimaginably hot, yet remains a liquid.
That is so weird.
And in this superheated, pressurized state, the water becomes a remarkably powerful solvent. As it gets forced back up toward the surface of the seafloor, it leaches heavy metals, sulfides, and other minerals directly out of the surrounding basalt rock.
It is dissolving the Earth itself.
It creates this toxic, boiling chemical soup. And when this superheated, mineral-saturated fluid finally bursts out of the seafloor and violently collides with the freezing 2-degree ocean water,
Boom.
you get a massive, instantaneous chemical reaction. The dissolved minerals suddenly precipitate out of the fluid. They solidify.
And that builds the chimneys.
Exactly. This precipitation builds towering, chimney-like structures, the vents themselves, some of which are stories tall, and the fluid pouring out of them looks like thick, billowing black smoke, hence the term black smokers.
The sleep tape calls it belching, which is such a visceral, ugly word, but it accurately describes the Earth violently expelling this dark, toxic fluid into the ocean.
It's very evocative.
So, returning to the concept of the forge, the tectonic plates are the anvil, the magma is the fire, and the Earth is churning out this raw chemical soup.
Right.
But a forge implies creation. On land, a forge creates tools. What is the underwater forge creating?
It is creating the foundational fuel for life. It is manufacturing the replacement for the sun.
How is that even possible?
Well, the mineral-rich fluid belching from these vents is incredibly toxic to almost all life as we know it. It is loaded with hydrogen sulfide, the chemical that gives rotten eggs their smell.
Oh, gross.
And if you or I were exposed to those concentrations of hydrogen sulfide, it would be instantly lethal. It binds to our hemoglobin and shuts down cellular respiration.
But the deep ocean ecosystem doesn't just tolerate this toxic smoke, does it?
No, it eats it.
It eats it. That is the biological miracle here.
It is a process called chemosynthesis, and it completely rewrites the rule book on how an ecosystem can function.
Right, because on the surface, plants use chlorophyll to capture photons from the sun.
They use that solar energy to rip apart water and carbon dioxide molecules and rearrange them into glucose sugar.
That's photosynthesis. Light energy becomes chemical energy.
Exactly. But at the bottom of the ocean, there are new photons to do the ripping.
So they use the raw heat and chemical potential of the planet itself.
Precisely. Around these black smokers, massive colonies of specialized extremophile bacteria have evolved to process the hydrogen sulfide.
Okay.
They don't use light. They use the chemical bonds of the toxic minerals. They oxidize the hydrogen sulfide, and the energy released by breaking those chemical bonds is used to manufacture organic carbon sugars out of the dissolved carbon dioxide in the water.
They are literal stone eaters.
Yeah, they really are.
They are taking the poisonous boiling exhaust of the Earth's crust and turning it into food.
They are the primary producers of the deep. They are the grass of the Hadal zone.
The grass of the Hadal zone, I love that.
And because these bacteria are so staggeringly efficient at chemosynthesis, they support an incredibly dense biomass.
So we aren't just talking about a few microbes clinging to a rock, though.
Oh no. We are talking about lush, thriving alien gardens packed around these boiling vents.
I am fascinated by the creatures that live in these gardens because they have had to completely integrate themselves with this geological forge.
They really have.
When you look at footage of hydrothermal vents, you don't just see bacteria, you see these massive, terrifying-looking tube worms.
Ah, yes. Riftia pachyptilla. Giant tube worms that can grow up to 8 feet long.
8 feet long?
Yes. They have these brilliant, blood-red plumes extending from the top of white chitinous tubes.
And what's mind-blowing about these tube worms is how heavily they rely on the chemosynthetic bacteria. From what I understand, an adult giant tube worm doesn't even have a mouth, right?
Well, that's right. It has no stomach. It has no digestive tract whatsoever.
It is a profound evolutionary adaptation. The tube worm has completely outsourced its digestion and energy production to the bacteria.
Yes, inside the worm's body is a specialized organ called a trophosome.
A trophosome.
It makes up a massive portion of the worm's internal anatomy, and it is essentially just a biological sac packed with billions of these chemosynthetic bacteria.
So it's an internal greenhouse.
Exactly. The worm uses its red plume, which is red because it's filled with a complex hemoglobin to absorb oxygen, carbon dioxide, and the highly toxic hydrogen sulfide directly from the vent water.
But wait, how does the sulfide not kill the worm?
Its blood binds the toxic sulfide safely, preventing it from poisoning the worm, and transports it directly to the trophosome.
The worm is acting as a biological delivery system. It harvests the toxic exhaust from the forge, carries it inside its own body, and feeds it to the bacteria.
In return, the bacteria oxidize the sulfide, produce organic sugars, and leak those sugars directly into the worm's tissues.
So the worm feeds entirely off the metabolic byproduct of the bacteria living inside it.
It is a perfect, closed-loop symbiosis fueled entirely by the violent geology of the Earth.
It makes you completely reevaluate the word habitable.
It really does, doesn't it?
When astronomers look for life on other planets, or when we just think about what a good environment is, we have a very surface-level bias.
We think of mild temperatures, gentle rain, sunlight, breathable air.
Yeah, we look at a black smoker, a place with 400-degree boiling toxic water slamming into freezing, crushing pressures, and our immediate instinct is that is an environment designed to destroy life.
It looks like the definition of a hostile wasteland.
But the reality of the underwater forge proves the exact opposite. These extremes are not destroying life. They are the intense engines actively creating it.
The deprivation of the deep ocean is not a barrier, it's a catalyst.
Yes.
The Hadal zone proves that extreme violence, geologically speaking anyway, can be deeply nurturing.
It's so counterintuitive.
But think about it. The crushing pressure is required to keep the superheated water from boiling into steam, allowing it to remain a fluid solvent.
Yeah.
The violent collision of hot and cold water is required to precipitate the minerals and build the chimneys.
Okay, yeah.
And the toxicity of the hydrogen sulfide is the exact fuel needed to run the chemosynthetic engine. What looks like hell to us is actually an oasis.
It completely expands the canvas of where life can exist in the universe.
Oh, tremendously.
If life doesn't need the sun and actively thrives in boiling, toxic, high-pressure environments, then moons like Europa or Enceladus.
Right, which have thick ice crusts hiding deep liquid oceans and likely their own hydrothermal vents.
Suddenly they look incredibly promising for finding life.
The mechanisms we see at these underwater forges tell us that life doesn't just tolerate extreme conditions. Sometimes life absolutely requires them.
So let's look at the progression of the bizarre reality we've unpacking from this sleep tape so far.
Let's review.
First, we saw life manipulating the physics of light.
Yes.
The ultra-black fish bends the rules of reflection, creating a microscopic velvet labyrinth to become a void, to survive the biological searchlights of predators.
A masterpiece of optical engineering, driven by the threat of instant death.
Second, we saw life leveraging violent geology. The entire ecosystem abandons the sun and plugs directly into the thermal and chemical exhaust of the planet's tectonic plates, completely redefining what an energy source can be.
It replaces solar power with planetary heat and toxic chemistry.
Which establishes a very clear pattern. The Hadal Zone is an environment that actively rewards rule breaking.
That's a great way to put it.
If you play by the normal biological rules of the sunlit surface world, you die. To survive the extreme deprivation, you have to break the rules of physics, and you have to break the rules of energy.
You have to find a biological loophole in the fundamental laws of nature.
And if an environment can force life to break the rules of light and energy so thoroughly, it shouldn't be entirely surprising that its inhabitants might eventually figure out how to break the most fundamental, terrifying rule of all.
The rule of time.
Rule of time. The final mind-bending fact in our source document tackles this directly.
Oh, this one is my favorite.
The sleep tape shifts its focus to a specific creature, and it describes its capability with a phrase that literally stops you in your tracks.
It mentions the immortal jellyfish.
Yes, and it states that this animal can rewind its own life cycle over and over.
Rewind its own life cycle. This is the point where biological science starts to sound like science fiction.
Or magic.
We need to dissect the cellular mechanics of what rewinding actually means here, because the text isn't just talking about living a long time.
No, it's not.
It is talking about fundamentally subverting entropy.
Right, because our normal definition of biological immortality or extreme longevity is just stretching out the timeline.
Exactly. We look at a Galapagos tortoise that lives for 200 years.
Or a Greenland shark that cruises the dark waters for 4 or 5 centuries, or even a bristlecone pine tree that stands for millennia.
But those organisms are all still traveling on a one-way street.
They are still subject to the arrow of time. They are born, they mature, they slowly accumulate cellular damage.
Their telomeres shorten, their tissues degrade, and eventually they succumb to age or disease.
They're walking toward the cliff edge of death, very, very slowly, but they are still walking toward it.
But the jellyfish is doing something entirely different. The phrase rewind implies taking that one-way street of aging and throwing the car into reverse.
It is the literal reversal of biological development.
The species is Turritopsis dohrnii, and the cellular mechanism it uses to achieve this is called transdifferentiation.
Transdifferentiation. Okay, if chemosynthesis was the biological loophole for energy, this sounds like the biological cheat code for mortality. How does a cell actually rewind?
Well, to understand transdifferentiation, we have to look at how cells normally work.
Okay, break it down for me.
In humans, and in almost all complex biology we know, cellular development is a one-way journey of specialization.
Okay.
You start as a single fertilized egg, a mass of undifferentiated stem cells. These stem cells have infinite potential. They can become anything. But as you develop, those cells receive chemical signals that lock them into a specific fate.
They get a job description.
Exactly. A stem cell becomes a muscle cell, or a nerve cell, or a skin cell. And once a cell makes that transition, once it differentiates, its fate is sealed.
It turns off all the genetic code that isn't related to being a muscle cell.
Precisely. A muscle cell cannot suddenly decide to become a nerve cell. It is locked in, and its only future is to perform its specific function, age, and eventually undergo programmed cell death.
The doors of potential lock behind it.
They do. But the cells of Turritopsis dohrnii have the ability to pick those locks.
Wow.
When the adult jellyfish, which is called a medusa, the typical bell-shaped swimming creature with tentacles, when that adult faces extreme environmental stress, it triggers a miraculous cellular cascade.
What kind of stress are we talking about here?
Starvation. a sudden change in water temperature, physical damage from a predator, basically any scenario that would normally result in the death of the organism.
Okay, so a crisis.
When the jellyfish senses that game over is imminent, it doesn't just die. It initiates a process of total structural collapse.
It melts down.
It literally does. The bell of the jellyfish shrinks. It reabsorbs its own tentacles. It stops swimming and sinks to the ocean floor, transforming into a microscopic amorphous blob of tissue called a cyst.
That's disturbing but fascinating.
And inside that cyst, transdifferentiation occurs. The highly specialized cells of the adult jellyfish, the muscle cells that pulse the bell, the nerve cells that sense light, the stinging cells and the tentacles, they begin to forget their identities.
They erase their job descriptions.
Exactly. They access parts of their DNA that were permanently locked. A specialized muscle cell chemically regresses, loses its muscular characteristics, and reverts back into a state of pluripotency.
It becomes an unspecialized stem cell again.
Yes.
That is incredible. It's like taking the specialized Lego blocks of a fully built castle, melting the plastic down, and recasting them into raw, unshaped blocks.
And then it rebuilds. Those newly unspecialized stem cells multiply and organize themselves not into a new adult jellyfish, but into a polyp.
A polyp.
A polyp is the juvenile infant stage of a jellyfish's life cycle. It looks like a tiny plant-like stalk attached to a rock.
Okay.
That single polyp then clones itself, creating a whole colony of polyps, and eventually those polyps bud off to create brand new, fully formed adult medusas.
So it takes the exact same physical cellular material of the dying adult, rewinds it to the embryonic stage, and starts the entire life cycle over again.
Yes.
And the source text says it can do this over and over.
As far as we can observe biologically, there is no limit to how many times Turritopsis dohrnii can trigger this process.
You're kidding.
No, it can cycle from maturity to infancy endlessly, theoretically bypassing biological death from old age or environmental stress entirely.
This mechanism forces us into a profound philosophical corner, honestly. As I hear you describe the actual mechanics of a cell melting down, forgetting its identity, and rebuilding a new infant body, it creates a massive paradox about identity itself.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's the biological ship of Theseus.
It is the ultimate real-world application of that thought experiment.
Right. And for anyone listening who is unfamiliar, the ship of Theseus is an ancient philosophical puzzle.
Right.
It asks, if you have a famous wooden ship, and over the years the planks of wood begin to rot, and you slowly replace every single plank, every mast, every sail with new material until none of the original physical material remains, is it still the same ship?
And the jellyfish complicates that even further because it isn't just replacing parts slowly over time.
No, it's not.
It is violently deconstructing the entire ship simultaneously, turning the wood back into sawdust, and then using that exact same sawdust to build a completely new, smaller boat.
Which raises the uncomfortable question, when the jellyfish rewinds, who is actually surviving? From a genetic standpoint, you said it clones itself. The DNA in the new infant polyp is identical to the DNA of the dying adult medusa.
The genetic code is a perfect unbroken continuum.
But from a structural and experiential standpoint, everything is obliterated.
Everything.
The nervous system that existed in the adult, the physical arrangement of the cells, the specific memories or conditioned responses that organism might have acquired, all of that is melted down into a cyst.
Yeah.
So when the adult jellyfish triggers this process, is it truly achieving immortality for itself? Or is the adult essentially choosing to die in order to give birth to an identical twin?
Is it continuity of existence or just a highly elaborate form of reproduction fueled by self-cannibalization?
Exactly.
It's a staggering question. We tend to view identity through the lens of human consciousness.
Right, we value the continuity of our memories.
Our personality, the structural integrity of our brain. If a human were to melt down into a puddle of stem cells and reform as a baby with no memories of its past life, we would likely consider the original adult to be dead.
The continuity of consciousness was broken.
Right. The person I was is gone, even if a genetically identical baby now exists.
But what is so illuminating about the Hadal Zone and the evolutionary pressures of the deep ocean is that nature does not care about our philosophical definitions of identity.
Nature definitely does not care.
The ocean doesn't care about the continuity of consciousness or the ego of the jellyfish. It only cares about the continuity of the biological machine.
It only cares about keeping the DNA in the game.
Survival is the only metric of success.
Exactly. In an extreme alien realm where survival is impossibly difficult, where you are constantly hunted by predators with biological lasers, where the water is freezing, the pressure is crushing, and food is incredibly scarce.
Just staying alive another day is a monumental task.
Evolution down there hasn't just favored tougher armor or sharper teeth or faster swimming speeds. It has favored the ultimate escape hatch.
If you can't run away from a predator, and you can't fight it off, and you're starving in the cold, dark void, your last resort is to simply cease being an adult and start over.
You just drop out of the timeline.
Cyclical immortality becomes the ultimate desperate survival strategy when the environment is actively trying to kill you every single second.
It is the evolutionary equivalent of refusing to accept a checkmate. You just flip the board over and set the pieces back to their starting positions.
It is deeply humbling to think about our own relationship with time and aging compared to this tiny creature,
Oh, very humbling.
Humanity spends billions of dollars on medical research, pharmaceuticals, and technology, all in a desperate attempt to just slow the clock down a fraction of a percent.
We fight so hard for just a few extra years of longevity.
And meanwhile, miles beneath the surface of the ocean in complete and utter darkness, a jellyfish has already solved the fundamental problem of mortality by figuring out how to run the clock backward.
It reinforces the overarching theme of this entire journey into the deep. Every single adaptation we've discussed points to a profound truth about how life responds to hardship.
Let's bring all of these threads together, because the picture we've painted of this alien world based on this bizarre sleep tape is almost too vast to hold in your head at once.
It is a lot to process.
Think about the landscape we have just traversed for you, listening right now.
We started our journey in the absolute void of the water column.
We entered a world where the darkness is so total and the threat of a single photon of light is so deadly that biology was forced to engineer metamaterials.
The ultra blackfish, yeah.
The ultra blackfish constructs a microscopic velvet labyrinth out of densely packed melanosomes. It defeats the biological searchlights of its predators not by hiding behind a rock, but by bending the physics of reflection,
Swallowing the light.
turning its own body into a swimming invisible black hole.
Then we looked at the foundation of the ecosystem, at how this lightless void sustains itself against all odds. We descended to the mid-ocean ridges and found the underwater forges.
We saw the violent, torn crust of the earth violently belching superheated, toxic fluid into the freezing deep.
We saw how life abandons the sun entirely.
Bacteria eat the poisonous exhaust of the planet, using the heat and chemistry of the forge to manufacture the building blocks of life through chemosynthesis.
We learned that an environment of boiling temperatures, crushing pressures, and toxic minerals isn't a wasteland.
It is an intense, necessary engine of creation that supports lush alien gardens.
And finally, we confronted the ultimate subversion of nature's laws at the cellular level.
The immortal jellyfish, a creature that treats its own physical existence like a rewindable tape,
It defies the one-way arrow of entropy.
responding to the threat of death by melting its adult body down into raw, pluripotent stem cells, erasing its own cellular identity to become an infant again, over and over.
Effectively outsmarting the concept of biological death.
When you look at all of these mechanisms together, the physics of the black hole camouflage, the chemistry of the underwater forge, the cellular reprogramming of the immortal jellyfish, what stands out to you? What is the core insight for the person listening to this deep dive right now?
For me, the true aha moment of this deep dive is completely reframing how I view limitations. Limitations.
Yes. In our daily lives, and even in standard biological science, we tend to view limitations as inherently negative.
Right. A lack of light, freezing cold temperatures, crushing physical pressure, toxic environments, starvation. Those sound like insurmountable barriers.
They sound like the things that stop life from flourishing. But what the Hadal Zone proves with absolute clarity is that extreme limitations are actually the ultimate creative constraints.
That is a phenomenal synthesis. Knowledge is most valuable when we can extract a broader pattern from it.
Exactly. The defining context of the deep ocean is absolute deprivation. But that deprivation does not stifle life.
It forces life to be wildly, almost incomprehensibly inventive.
It forces the evolution of miraculous, rule-breaking adaptations that simply would not exist in a comfortable, easy environment.
Without the absolute crushing darkness, there is no evolutionary pressure to engineer the invisible shadow.
Right.
Without the utter absence of the sun, life never discovers the toxic miracles of the underwater forge.
Without the relentless daily hostility of the environment, a jellyfish never needs to unlock the biological cheat code of cyclical immortality.
The extreme limitations forge the miracles. The tighter the constraint, the more brilliant the biological solution must be. That is a principle that extends far beyond marine biology.
It really is. It's a principle you can apply to almost anything: engineering, art, personal resilience. Sometimes the harshest parameters produce the most brilliant, unexpected outcomes.
And exploring those unexpected outcomes brings us full circle right back to the beautiful, almost absurd contradiction we noted at the very beginning of this discussion.
The sleep tape.
The sleep tape.
I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, or perhaps as you try to fall asleep tonight.
Let's remember the actual intended purpose of the source document we used today. Shadows of the Hadal Zone. 100 deep-sea alien facts for deep sleep.
A digital tool meticulously designed for human relaxation.
It was created with the express intent that you would put on your headphones, close your eyes, and use the descriptions of these incredibly complex biological mechanisms to drift off into peaceful, quiet unconsciousness.
It is meant to soothe your anxieties. But think about the profound irony of what you are actually using to lull yourself to sleep.
You are seeking tranquility by listening to a chronicle of absolute, unforgiving survival.
Exactly. While you are curled up in your warm, safe, comfortable bed, sinking into the quiet calm of sleep, deliberately turning off your awareness of the world. Miles beneath you, in a crushing, freezing, pitch-black void, the most chaotic, extreme, and violent acts of survival are silently playing out right now.
At this very second.
Predators are sweeping the dark with biological lasers. Invisible shadows are bending the laws of physics to swallow the light.
The torn earth is violently belching boiling toxins to fuel alien gardens in the dark.
And a tiny jellyfish is desperately melting down its own cellular structure to escape death. The ultimate irony is that the most peaceful, relaxing sleep